Welcome to Dustman's Football, That's Not News. This is episode 4. We're not coming live to you from my house, which is what it looks like. This is just the intro. We had a bit of a technical glitch on Friday. I sat down to edit it, and I haven't got one. So if you can guess which club we're at, it's in the Midlands. It's a top championship club, Croatian manager. So down to you to guess it. Here's the intro. Ready?
Let's do it.
Yeah, you guessed it. This is the Hawthorns and we're Dawson Football back for That's Not News episode 4. Dan, we scored up well.
I know, looking alright, mate.
That's Not News on tour. We're at West Brom, obviously, and we'll come on to West Brom, but first let's talk about Unai Emery at Arsenal. He's under a lot of pressure. It's ever growing. They've just come off the back of a 1-1 draw away in Victoria in the Europa League. What's your view on the Unai Emery situation?
Well, I think what's disappointing with Unai Emery is that when you watch Arsenal, there's no clear identity there. There's no clear way of playing football that he's established. If you look at the managers that have taken over teams in a far shorter period than Unai Emery's been in charge of Arsenal, so Lampard at Chelsea, Rodgers at Leicester, you know how Leicester are going to play. If I asked you to write down, the Leicester team for the next game, you'd be able to put it down. You have some kind of idea. But with Arsenal, it just seems like Emery bingo at the moment in terms of who's going on that lineup, because it comes out and you have absolutely no idea how they're going to play, who they're going to play, what kind of midfield they're going to operate. There's just no consistency, no identity at Arsenal. I think that's probably their biggest problem.
And obviously Emery's come in, he's replaced a cult hero in Arsene Wenger, who didn't necessarily have the best final few years at Arsenal, but established them as a top 4 team, if you like, and played. He did have an identity that Emery doesn't have. In his Arsenal career, Emery's averaged 1.78 points per Premier League game. For a team that's probably aiming for top 4, maybe even top 2, that's not really acceptable, is it? It should be in the 2.2 mark.
Yeah, definitely.
But then I can understand maybe why the Arsenal board have chosen him, because he's had 684 games as a manager. It's experience. He's averaged at 1.84, which is a little bit better, but it's still not quite the pedigree that maybe Arsenal should have gone for.
Yeah, I think that you can definitely argue that. I think he was an interesting choice, because Arsenal, the culture surrounding the club and the influence that Arsenal Fan TV has genuinely had on the club and the way that it is perceived by the public, means that with managers now, I think it's important that you select ones that will face up well to the press, that aren't easy to criticise, that are safe options. But Emery wasn't. He's quite geekish in his mannerisms. We know the good evening, which is obviously become something of a meme, and people have started to ridicule him. Did you like that? Pretty good. Nothing but the best here. And I think from that aspect, he was mocked at PSG. He was known that players inside the dressing room that would obviously impersonate him and take the mickey out of him trying to speak French. And in that regard, having someone who, the amount of ridicule that was directed at Wenger when he left, having a manager appointed, which obviously those kind of problems could then come to the fruition. Obviously, it was an interesting one, but somewhat of a safe bet. He had a good track record, especially in the Europa League, which is where obviously Arsenal tend to be competing nowadays. So there was aspects of it which you could understand, but ways in which I think now if they could go back, they might look at other candidates.
And there are rumours that the Arsenal dressing rooms began to impersonate him, such as the PSG one did. He's managed 49 Premier League games in charge of the Gunners, 25 wins, which is actually quite a good stat.
Yeah.
But drawn 12, lost 12. The loss statistic is probably what worries most people, because he's probably lost as many games as Klopp has in the past 5 years there in 49 games. Is it necessarily that he just doesn't suit English football?
Well, what is interesting, if you actually break down the results, is that if we take this season and isolate it, there's only 1 loss at home this season in 9, 7 wins from those 9 games. So at home, they're actually a decent outfit. However, it's when they go away from home that they struggled. They've only won away from home twice in all competitions this season, one of which came in the Premier League, and that was a 1-0 away win against Newcastle. So not very convincing. It seems to be when they go away from home that they struggle. And you can see that. I think that relates mostly to a confidence issue within the side. I think you watch them go away, and again that kind of mentality problem of there is no real cohesion in the team. I think especially defensively, it's an absolute shambles at the back for Arsenal. I think from the midfield back, Xhaka's obviously become a scapegoat for the whole Emery situation. Really, I think we saw the reaction when he got taken off against Wolves, and both the reaction from the fans, but then what he gave back to the fans, completely justified Xhaka's actions. I just want to state that. He's their captain. The fans, he doesn't go out. He doesn't sit there in the changing room before a game and think, right, today I'm going to drop an absolute clanger. Yeah. He goes out there. He's trying his best. I think he's a product of Emery's system, which places so much emphasis on that holding midfielder, because I think the rest of the team is so just an absolute chaos, where you're asking a lot of the midfielder to sit in that position and calm it all down.
And you talk about the midfield, it is an important position in Unai Emery side. In his career, Eva Banega and Koke are his most used players. And then he came to Arsenal. Xhaka is in the top three, along with obviously Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, who's one of the best strikers in the league, and Socrates. I'm not going to bother. Yeah. Socrates is in that top three as well. So it is the defensive side of his game is obviously the defensive midfield / defensive is more important to Emery. But it's just not really showing at the moment.
No, they're in carnage at the back. So what is interesting is, in the Europa League, they've been dispossessed the fourth most times of any team in the competition. And this is in the Premier League as well. They're joint 18th in clean sheets, third in most saves made. There's just complete disarray at the back. It's kind of 4 draws in a row now for Arsenal. One of them was a 5-all, was it, at Anfield? They dropped points at Wolves. Villa went there and they were able to go a goal up, and they had to come from behind in that game as well. Just 1 win in 6 games. I can't see him staying in this position much longer. I think the Arsenal fans have turned on him. I think the confidence that the side holds in him must be completely shot. I think the confidence that he has in his team. I think what is perhaps most detrimental to Unai Emery, and the fact that it's perhaps most obvious to see that this isn't working, is the fact that he still hasn't managed to work Aubameyang, Lacazette and Pepe into a workable front three. Now, if you have those players at your disposal and you are a manager of Arsenal, by now you are more than expected to have those three in a system whereby they're firing on all cylinders. And they just don't score enough goals, and when you combine that with the amount that they concede at the back, they've only scored 16 and 11 this season. That's the same as Villa, 9 less than Chelsea, 11 less than Leicester, and almost 20 less than Man City have scored already at this stage. And when you look at that attacking front three, it should arguably be the best in the Premier League if you're talking about on paper, because there's so many goal scorers in there, but he hasn't got it working, and I can't see any future for Emery Arsenal.
And he has always struggled against the so-called top 4, top 6 teams. It's not really the teams that he gets results against. But if you look at, you isolated this season, obviously, if you isolate last season, from August to December last season, they went 14 Premier League games unbeaten. They beat Spurs 4-2. Maybe it was the honeymoon period. Something fundamentally has changed within that Arsenal side for Emery to be so much under pressure. Because if we would have had this discussion this time last season, Emery was sitting pretty happy.
Yeah.
Perhaps Emery's reputation lies on what he did with Sevilla.
Yeah, I think absolutely. He was fairly successful at PSG, won titles there. But I mean, for a PSG manager to come in, you have to win the league title. It is almost mandatory. As I said, he had huge Europa League success at Sevilla, and I do think that contributed. It was probably the main aspect to the job. But you think of the candidates that were floating around when they interviewed him. Mikel Arteta was kind of heavily into the job. I think he was interviewed, but it was Emery that they went for. And I think now it says a lot, whereby I think Arteta again would be appealing, which says that the club hasn't moved anywhere. Is that period? If you've got a manager and he's been in as long as Emery's had, had almost a few seasons now, and you're still considering the managers which you should have appointed beforehand to replace him. Yeah. It's just the club just hasn't moved anywhere. The fans definitely don't help. They create a toxic environment whereby I think the Arsenal players now just feel so much pressure when they go onto the pitch. I think most of them are so shot for confidence, they're so scared to put a foot wrong, that I think they really play within themselves. They're not too expansive. I think The problem is with Aubameyang is that he scores goal, but he's one of those strikers whereby if he doesn't score goals, he's not a link-up striker. He doesn't add much to the team. So if he has a game where he doesn't score, he's not the kind of striker that can drop in deep and help in kind of a false nine role and bring players into play. And they're so reliant on Aubameyang's goals in those games where he doesn't show up, obviously because he can't every game. They do really struggle.
We talked about Arteta. There was, I think it was 8 candidates. So we had Thierry Henry, Mikel Arteta, Patrick Vieira, who's obviously the Nice manager, Allegri, left Juve in the summer, Julian Lopetegui,
got it.
Sevilla manager,
Yeah.
Sampaoli,
Yeah.
and Rangnick.
Yeah.
They were the other candidates that they employed. You tell me that at least 3 of them aren't better than Unai Emery from the off.
Yeah, definitely.
I refuse to believe someone can interview that well that people of Allegri's calibre aren't still ahead of him in that process.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, and I think a lot of managers, because of the culture that surrounds the club and the negativity that has surrounded Arsenal for the entire decade, I would say, I think, kind of post 2010, that was when Arsenal started to decline and fell off, and I think they haven't really managed to turn around, and such as the negativity and the toxic nature of the club right now. I think the most toxic club in English football in terms of the way that the fans right up there. I know as a Stoke fan that might be hard to say, but I really do think most managers would shy away from that right now, and there's a lot of good managers that are available right now that would definitely do a good job at Arsenal, but whether you can entice a manager of Allegri's stature to come and manage at Arsenal in the current climate remains to be seen.
And obviously there were candidates that get talked about that weren't interviewed. Your Eddie Howe's, Nuno Espirito Santos, and I heard someone say the other day Arsene Wenger could return. Jamie O'Hara has today said that Arsene Wenger is too good for that Arsenal team. That Arsenal team, that Arsene Wenger basically created, there's about 4 Emery signings in there.
Yeah.
Arsene Wenger, that is a backbone of an Arsene Wenger team. How is he too good to go into that job again? He won't, because it'd be silly. So if Emery leaves, they don't want to go back to where they've already interviewed, because maybe then people will be a little bit offended that they weren't employed. Is it Eddie Howe? Is it Espirito Santos? Is there someone else out there for Arsenal?
Yeah, I think definitely. I think you definitely lends itself to a manager who can come in. So you have managers out there that I wouldn't say it's a rebuild, because the tools are there. That they are still, despite having signed 3, desperate need of a centre back. The signings that they've made in centre back have been absolutely scandalous, to be honest with you. None of which have come in and reassured the defence at all. David Luiz was a completely bizarre signing. I mean, you've got a back 4 there which are error prone, and you add one of the most notoriously error prone defenders in the world into that back line. You're only a Pepe short away from an absolute scandal in that back line, to be honest with you. And so it's been really bizarre in that regard, and whether a manager wants to come in and rebuild that is a different matter. As I said, a lot of good managers out there right now. It seems that Ancelotti, he could be losing his job soon in Napoli with the scandal that's going on there. So he's another name that enters the hat that has Premier League pedigree that could come in and do a job. The players are there, as I said, they have the squad. I fundamentally believe that. I think even when you go into the midfield, I know Xhaka gets a lot of criticism, but Dani Ceballos is a good player. I like Guendouzi, I like Lucas Torreira. What is going on with Ozil is anybody's guess, to be honest with you. That's a completely different topic of discussion altogether. I think Unai Emery's biggest criticism could potentially be the way he's handled that, to be honest with you. In a side where you're struggling to create goals, where your strikers aren't getting the service that they deserve, there isn't the connection between the midfield and attack. If only you had a world-class attacking number 10 that could sit in there and pull those strings. I think it just adds to a long list of problems right now. There's problems in the past with backing, and I know they've signed players for large fees, but before the summer, I'm sure you remember there was a lot of rumours saying that they only had 40 million to spend. I know when they went and almost splashed double that on Pepe. But there's questions of backing, questions around fans, key members of the first team squad. It's an unappealing job right now for me.
Absolutely, it's certainly maybe a poison chalice.
Absolutely.
We'll be back in a second, but first take a look at what's soon to come on Dawson Football for the rest of the year.
It ain't my fault that I'm out here getting loose. Gotta blame it on the goose. Gotta blame it
So that is what is to come on Dawson Football. Very exciting, Dan.
Absolutely.
Agree. We're here at West Brom. It'd be rude for us not to talk about the Baggies.
Yep.
I don't really want to after the result, but I'll do it anyway. Slaven Bilic came in the summer. He is most notorious probably for his Croatia and West Ham roles. Croatia, he did an alright job, but at West Ham is where he really made his name, especially in the English game, where their last season at Upton Park, or the Billing Ground, whatever you want to call it, they definitely overperformed. They finished 7th in the league, 4 points from the top 4.
Yeah.
Is Slaven Bilic a bit of a coup for West Brom?
Yeah, definitely. I'm going to take it back a few months when they sacked Darren Moore, and everyone was up in arms. Not just fans of West Brom, the entire footballing community seemed to turn on West Brom in that scenario. They then lost in the playoff semis, and again the finger was pointed at the board, whereby if they'd have kept Darren Moore, could they? Because it was on penalties, to Villa. They lost out there. Sorry, I'll just put that smile away. It lost on penalties, and as a Villa fan, I'll say they were unfortunate. They were the better team for the vast majority of the second leg, especially here. They dominated. It was only really the second half at Villa where it slipped away from them. Villa scored those 2 goals, and had they had Darren Moore instead of a caretaker manager, maybe things would have been different. But here we are.
At a Premier League club.
Absolutely. But here we are. Slaven Bilic in, and suddenly all that's forgotten, and such is the job that he's come in and done. It was a fantastic bit of recruitment. He's come in, he's had such an influence, and even when, as soon as they made that appointment, for me, I thought, right, that's it, West Brom are going to be really up there this season, pushing for promotion. He's an absolutely class act, and in the Championship, I think he's a cut above most of the managers.
West Brom have lost a couple of good players over the summer. They lost Jay Rodriguez, obviously Dwight Gale returned from his loan to Newcastle. But then Bilic is coming in. They've recruited really well. They've had Semi Ajayi from Rotherham, who is a fantastic player, really young, really hungry. Darnell Furlong from QPR, who I watched on Monday night when they came to Stoke, and he's the kind of fullback that I wish we'd signed. He just was up and down all the time, and was just he had so much desire to win the ball. The second balls are probably what won the game for West Brom on Monday night, and he was a big part of that. And then the player of the season for West Brom, without a doubt, has been Romain Sawyers, who is one of the best midfielders in this league, but is highly underrated. I think he cost something like £5 million.
Yeah.
How important has minimum Charlie Austin as well, who's come in? How important has Slaven Bilic's player recruitment been?
Well, fantastic, and I'm going to single out their business in the loan market. Because Matheus Pereira and Grady Diangana have been absolute revelations.
Yeah.
Both of them have 8 goal involvements in 10 starts this season. Diangana with 1 more goal than Pereira. I think Matheus Pereira 3 goals, 5 assists. It's just been fantastic. Both of them have been a breath of fresh air, and I think there's such is the youth and the hunger for those 2 players. You can see it when they play on the pitch. They're absolutely explosive, and they're so good to watch. When you get them up front with Charlie Austin. I mean, you look at players like Kenneth Sahor that they've also signed, and even he's from scoring 50% of his starts, 2 from 4 this season. So he's shown promise. And I think the recruitment this season has been exemplary. Charlie Austin has yet to really get going. He's had a couple of good games here and there. I think it was a game here against Cardiff, which was probably his best game. He put some assists in that one, and it showed his all-round game was starting to pick up. But Matt Phillips, so you've got the kind of the combination of those young players like Diangana and Pereira, and Matt Phillips has really stuck. Kyle Bartley, as you mentioned, Ajayi has formed a really solid partnership at the back there. Jake Livermore is performing well in that holding midfield role, and so you've got a really good blend of youth and experience that are coming through. And with Bilic at the helm, it's promising, but you always run a risk when you rely heavily on loan players that don't have an obligation to come back to the club in the summer. There's already rumours, although I think Pellegrini distilled them yesterday, that Diangana might be recalled in January. They suffered a similar fate with Harvey Barnes last season, whereby Leicester recalled him in January, and that really put their season at a standstill. But it looks like this season could be the one for West Brom.
And they've only lost 1 league game all season, obviously it was to Leeds. They don't really look like they're ever going to beat any of the fellow promotion chasers. They've drawn with Fulham, with Derby and with Charlton, who obviously are the underdogs that we talked about a couple of weeks back. Maybe Bilic doesn't want to necessarily concentrate on those fixtures as much, and is definitely out there to make sure he wins the fixtures that they should be winning, because that's where maybe the points lie.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, we all know how competitive the Championship is, and it's no mean feat. You know, beating those teams that are beating those teams that are around. You know, everyone can go on 10-game win streaks. It's just, I don't suppose that's possible in the Championship, though.
Wait, wow, no, we don't want to talk about that.
But no, you have to beat the teams that are lower, and you know, if you do that with how competitive the Championship is, as long as you draw those games against the teams that are around you in the top 6, you're going to send in good stead. You know, the record this season for Bilic, you know, 8 wins from 16, 6 draws, just those 2 losses. One of them was in the cup, and one was that game against Leeds. So they're performing really well, and they're my clear favourites to, I would say, win the league this year.
Wow, that's quite a shout. Like you say, the top of the league, 30 points, 2 points in front of Preston North End, whose manager looks like he's going to stay. They've got quite an underrated player in their ranks, in Hal Robson-Kanu, who obviously performed as he did at the Euros a couple of years back. That got him his move here from Reading, where he was kind of just another name on the team sheet. Slaven Bilic, I went to his press conference on Monday night after the Stoke game, where he scored, obviously, the penalty after that Cameron Carter-Vickers challenge. That was so fantastic. Bilic says that he's underrated him as a player. He hasn't used him as much as maybe he should have, because he scores goals, but not only does he score goals, Robson-Kanu's hold-up play, his movement, just his all-round game is actually a lot better than he gets credit for.
Absolutely, and he's such a fantastic squad player, because you know he's one of those where you know you referenced his past roles at previous clubs like Reading, whereby you know he's kind of been a fringe player at times, and being that kind of player for the vast majority of his career has meant that he can come to a club like West Brom, and if he's on the bench in one game, he's more than happy to come off and try and have an impact, as he so often does in games. But he's just yet another striking option that they have that they can rely on. You can play those 2 young wingers up front. You've got Charlie Austin, Kenneth Zahor, who I talked about, and when you've got Hal Robson-Kanu as well, there's so many different ways which you can line up, so many different formations in which you can play. They tend to go for the 4-3-3, which is primary, as most teams do nowadays. But there's so many different ways where you can line up that team. There's a lot of different potential strike partnerships in there, and having that player like Robson-Kanu who can sit on the bench in some games and is keeps a good attitude, trains hard, works hard, is a good pro, keeps his head down, and just comes on and tries to benefit himself and the team, is exactly what you need in the Championship when you have so many games.
And you talk about so many games, we'll look at the next 5 fixtures. They go away to Hull tomorrow, let's get the date. Then obviously it's the international break, then they come back and they've got 4 really tough games. Sheffield Wednesday, Gary Monk has got them riding on the crest of a wave. Bristol City, Lee Johnson's team is always hard to beat, another manager that looks set to stay in his job. Preston North, and then Swansea. Steve Cooper's doing a fantastic job there. So those 4 after the Hull game, with no disrespect to Hull, are a little bit easier than the prospect of the next 4 games, who are all potential promotion chasers, especially Preston and Swansea. That's where maybe Bilic. This is the kind of the crunch period for Bilic in terms of how he's going to set his sights out following January, following the transfer market, and trying to make sure that they are going to get back into the big league. And this time next year when we're here, we're going to be sat in the Premier League Stadium.
I think those games are huge for West Brom. When we spoke about their slightly sketchy record against the top 6 teams in that division, Bilic's tactical acumen has to shine in those games. You look at him as one of the most tactically astute managers in the league, and it is in those crunch games where perhaps that can be the difference. You look at Cooper at Swansea, who is doing a fantastic job, but Bilic has so much more experience in the upper divisions than him in that regard, and it's in those games where you'd like to see him be the difference in that regard, and he's got the quality in his team to go and win those games, but those games will almost certainly be the ones that define their season at the end of the day, and they're on a good run right now, and as you said, they didn't play particularly well at Stoke. I didn't think it wasn't the best game, but it's just that ability to keep the momentum going, keep grinding out performances that is ultimately going to be the difference. And West Brom fans won't care how they win those games if they can pick up and take back a decent points haul from those games. And I think ultimately they'll be happy.
Only time will tell to see if West Brom go back up. On a new feature for the show that Dan doesn't know about, I'm springing it upon him. We're going to take a look at Dan's face of the show. I've noticed when editing, Dan pulls a lot of funny faces, so here's the first one of many.
You're joking. Oh my god. That's going to be questionable. That's going to be questionable. That's going to be questionable.
So that was Dan's face of the show, which he's really happy about. I just sprung it upon him. I'm glad that I edit this show and Dan doesn't, because otherwise there would be plenty of questionable pictures of him. Definitely don't be checking out Dan's Twitter anytime soon.
Yeah, it's coming. It's coming.
We'll leave England and go to European football. We'll talk about Bayern Munich, who last weekend sacked Niko Kovac. For a bit of background on Niko Kovac, because I don't want you to do all the talking this week, I've been shouted out for that. Kovac, his first managerial break came with the Croatia under-21s in 2013. He was only in charge for 5 games. He was then given the promotion to the senior team, where he managed 19 games and won 10 of them before he left in 2015. He then, in 2016, took the Eintracht Frankfurt. I am struggling today. The Eintracht Frankfurt job.
There it is.
He was there for 2 years, 91 games, and his last game, ironically, with Frankfurt was a 3-1 win in the DFB Pokal final against Bayern Munich. What about Niko Kovac? First of all, what about Niko Kovac enticed Bayern to get him, even though obviously he wasn't the first choice?
Well, Frankfurt were exceptional last season. They were one of the most entertaining teams in the Bundesliga, if not in the world. They had a strike partnership, which, if you look at it now, is just frightening, of Luka Jovic and Sebastian Haller, who obviously we see now in the Premier League. Yeah. That was just exceptional, and they had such a wealth of attacking players. Filip Kostic as well weighed in heavily last season, and they were just exceptional to watch. They finished really well. They got themselves into the Europa League. Placed really highly, won obviously got to the final of the DFB Pokal, and it was just really good all around from Frankfurt. They were solid defensively. There was a lot to like about them, and since Guardiola, Bayern have had an ethos whereby they only appoint German-speaking managers. And so they're kind of limited in what managers they can bring to the club. It seems that in his absence they might be changing that strategy slightly, although I did see Arsene Wenger drop the other day in some punditry that he speaks fluent German, potentially as an advert to the club. But yeah, it was, and it started really well.
It did.
Yeah, they had this season especially. You can look at it in a number of ways. I think that they have a 70% win percentage. One loss since the start of the season. Before that loss to Frankfurt, that they did lose in the kind of the Germany equivalent of the Community Shield, but that was to Dortmund, which is a competitive fixture. And that loss, the only one loss in the league, was a 2-1. They won 7-2 against Spurs, 6-1 against Mainz, 4-0 against Cologne. They won 23-0 in a pre-season game. So from one end of the table, you could actually argue that perhaps Kovac has been slightly hard done by.
And you talk about Guardiola. Ever since maybe Guardiola left, Bayern never really reinvented themselves, trying to go in a different direction. Guardiola carries that direction on in the best way possible. There's nobody better than Guardiola doing that game. So when Kovac has come in, he's not really trying to reinvent the wheel in any stretch of the imagination.
No.
He's just trying to play that high pressing, attacking, energetic football. And maybe that's his biggest downfall, is that he hasn't tried to put a stamp on it as such.
Yeah, I think they lost the two very pillars of Bayern Munich over the last 10 years in Ribéry and Robben when those guys left in the summer. That's a big chasm to fill, because they not just embody Bayern Munich and the success that they've had in recent years, but so influential in the dressing room, at the club. Still, were both putting up numbers well into their 30s, and so to lose them both was a big loss. But they've actually had some pretty good players come to the fold in those positions. Serge Gnabry has exploded onto the scene. He started to pick people's eyes, in this season especially, but last season he was performing very well. Obviously a player who didn't fare too well down on that pitch just a few seasons ago. But he's done well. Alphonso Davies is coming from the MLS, and he's had a positive impact. And there have been some players. I mean, Lewandowski has just been setting the world alight.
Lewandowski, who has scored in every game he's played in this season.
Yeah, every single game. He has 31 goals this season for club and country, and we sit here speaking on the 8th of November.
Absolutely crazy.
Ludicrous. 22 this season for Bayern, 9 for Poland. They're top scorers in the Bundesliga, mainly because of that, to be honest with you. And again, top scorers in the Bundesliga. These are stats that people will, and perhaps Kovac will look at and feel he was slightly hard done by with. But with Bayern, there is not just winning games, there is a way that you have to win those games. And you can look at certain games, draws with Hertha Berlin and Augsburg, who are 11th and 16th respectively. Unconvincing wins, 2-1 against Union Berlin, 14th, that was at home, 3-2 away at Olympiacos, 3-2 away at Paderborn, who are bottom of the league. And then I watched them play in the Pokal just last week against Bochum, who are, I think, bottom of the second tier. And
That's like.
no, I know, I can't imagine. It must be a bizarre feeling.
Bizarre.
I mean, he's top flight football. And it was a last minute winner it took for them to get past Bochum. And then after that, 5-1 away loss to his former team, Frankfurt, was the nail in the coffin for old Nico.
It was. You've seen already how much of a big fan I am of top player used stats.
Yeah.
Joshua Kimmich missed 1 game under Kovac, that's it. Lewandowski only missed 2. And that's in 1.5 years of Niko Kovac being the manager there. I looked yesterday at the top 11 players that he used, and there was one in every position. He had a preferred lineup, another downfall.
Yeah.
They play a lot of games. They play the league, they play their version of the FA Cup, they play Champions League, they play the Community Shield.
Yeah.
There's a lot of games there and there isn't enough rotation.
Mm-hmm.
And that's another downfall of Kovac. And he's been criticised quite heavily in the past few months for his pragmatic approach to games.
Yeah.
It's not the mindset of a top manager, is it?
No, there are a lot of ageing faces in that Bayern Munich team. Obviously, Jerome Boateng was sent off in that loss to Frankfurt, which ultimately, was terminal for Kovac. He's been around for a long time. Manuel Neuer. And these players are now starting to decline, and we're seeing that. Well, the old guard, obviously Ribery and Robben leaving. Lewandowski's now 31, and I know he's probably playing the best football he might have ever played in his career, but you can't rely on a 31-year-old like that for forever. And there's a lot of faces whereby they've been there for a long time. There's not that freshness around Bayern Munich, and that's been reflected in the Champions League, whereby they just haven't been a serious player in that competition for so long. Obviously, their domestic haul in the meantime has been ridiculous.
And that Spurs game was ridiculous.
It was, and that announced themselves, and suddenly people thought maybe these guys can win the Champions League. But the one thing that was stopping that, and I think we spoke about this on our podcast, whereby I didn't really believe Kovac was a manager that was good enough to win the Champions League, and so it has proved. Difficult now, whereby they go to look for a replacement because the kind of names that have been bandied about potentially lend themselves to the same problems that Kovac had. Allegri, Mourinho, both managers that will get Bayern Munich winning, but whether those managers get them winning attractively is a different matter, because neither manager is associated with kind of the free-flowing, expansive football that they like to see at the Allianz. And so who they opt for next as a manager could be very interesting.
Well, there are obviously other names. You mentioned Mourinho, Thomas Tuchel at PSG, was always going to be linked again. He was their first choice when they came to appoint Kovac, but ultimately he chose to go to the riches that are PSG, and I'm sure he'll have a very, very nice paycheck out of it. He could return to German football. It'd be a fantastic move for Bayern. Ralf Rangnick, who we just spoke about, was in the Arsenal job. Allegri, Mourinho, Ten Hag at Ajax would be a fantastic appointment, but he doesn't speak German. And then, I know he's retired, but how many times he's retired, you could always bring him Heinz back.
Yeah, I'm sure he's on speed dial, first of all. As soon as that managerial role goes, his eyes must light up. I wouldn't be surprised if we see him on an interim basis. I like Rangnick. I think he's done very well with Leipzig. Good manager in there, and he would certainly have them playing the kind of quick, explosive football that they like to see. Erik Ten Hag is an interesting one because I've seen him linked heavily, but for me, the Nou Camp calls for Erik Ten Hag, and I think that Ajax-Barcelona link will come to the fore once again, and I think he's the long-term successor to Ernesto Valverde there. But the Bayern Munich job will obviously appeal to him greatly. I'm sure if they come knocking, but Ajax have stood firm and said that no one's going anywhere until the end of the season, which suggests I do think we'll see an interim manager, which perhaps, as I said, lends itself to maybe a Wenger or a Heinkes or someone of that stature. I would love to see Mourinho go into that job. He's obviously personal bias there, he is my favourite, but I mean, just with the box office nature of that appointment, to be honest with you, I'd love to see it. But Bayern now need to create an identity, a fresh one, a new look Bayern Munich, someone that revolutionises that, and I think someone like Rangnick could well bring that. Someone, a young manager that can help them go forward.
Whoever does come in has got a bit of a task on their hands. Kovac was heavily questioned by the dressing room throughout his tenure there, and he lost the backing of the fans. Number one, he called Thomas Müller a backup. This is one of the best attackers in the world. He called him a backup. And number two, whilst in the Bayern Munich job, has gone back to his old club, and said that they are the best fans he's ever worked with. You can't say that when you're the manager of one of the biggest clubs in the country.
Well, in the world.
Yeah, that's just nothing you can say.
Mistakes are for sure, and interesting ones, because those are things that even I can see. When you've got tactical problems and things going on the pitch, they can be excused, but such comments are bizarre, especially when the kind of culture surrounding fan bases in German football is as it is, and territorially, they like to establish themselves as undisputed kings of Germany, going around and lending that title to other clubs was never going to help him. You expect better from him, really, in that regard. And Frankfurt are a fantastic club, and I'm sure kind of that 5-1 loss there would have certainly questioned his decision making in that regard. It'd be interesting to see kind of where he goes from here, because he did lose the respect, and those kind of key players like Müller, Boateng, Neuer, that have caused so much controversy with the German national team as well in recent seasons, whereby they kind of said, well, if they're not playing week in, week out for Germany, then they're just not going to play. They refuse to be called up for the squad.
Yeah.
And I think
manager Joachim Löw could make a move to Bayern.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he's been the Germany manager since the dawn of time. I think, to be honest with you, the dinosaurs were kicking about, and Joachim Löw was still pointing fingers out on the training field, picking his nose at it as well, as he so loves to do. But
he's not watching.
That Bayern now have to move on from these players. They've got centre-backs where I think they can really move on. Niklas Süle is imperial. The man is a fridge freezer. He's an absolute monster at the back. I absolutely love him. They've got good players coming through. I like some of the young goalkeepers that they've got coming through as well, which could potentially be a long-term successor to Manuel Neuer, because these things naturally you have to say goodbye to the glory years. Players like Thomas Müller, again, potentially have to be moved on for, but you have to integrate them. You still have them at their disposal, though they are declining. You have to use them when you're struggling against teams like Union Berlin, Olympiacos, Hertha Berlin, Augsburg. Those are the kind of players, the experienced heads that have played against these teams for so many years, that can make the difference in these games. And a refusal to use them has put them fourth in the Bundesliga. They've shipped 16 goals this season, which says that the defence, obviously I know 5 of those came in that game to Frankfurt, but there are defensive issues there, and a move on from the old guard, a reinventment of Bayern Munich, and a move towards the future. Looking at players like Gnabry, like Alphonso Davies, Joshua Kimmich, Leon Goretzka, Corentin Tolisso, these young Kingsley Coman, again another one these young bodies that they have in Bayern Munich have to be the future, and they have to come into the fore now.
First time will tell, and we'll look forward to talking about the new manager when he gets in.
Absolutely.
It's time for my favourite part, because I'm winning all the time.
Yeah.
We're going to ask some questions, we're going to get quizzical. Are you ready?
No.
Always. So Dan, I'm going to let you go first.
Yeah.
I know I've gone first a couple of weeks running, because I've won a couple of weeks running, but hey, who's for change?
Okay, so since we're on tour,
okay,
and we are going to several lovely grounds, around the UK. All of my questions this week, Jack, are stadium themed.
Okay.
So we're going to test your knowledge of sporting venues around the UK. So first off, a team that we've discussed today, Arsenal. Obviously not at the Emirates, but formerly at Highbury. Which other team plays at a stadium named Highbury?
Sheffield Wednesday.
Fleetwood.
What's Sheffield Wednesday's called?
Hillsborough.
Oh, balls!
That's a clanger. Did everyone see that? Highbury. Dawson football. Dawson, the key operative being this man's surname. And Dawson himself has just stated that Sheffield Wednesday play at Highbury. I think I've won already. But we're going to go on regardless and give you a chance to redeem yourself. Which is the highest above sea level in England? I understand it's a hard question. So I'm going to give you 3 options. I'm going to give you Carlisle, I'm going to give you Oldham Athletic, and I'm going to give you the Hawthorns.
Well, it's not the Hawthorns, so I've literally just watched you make that answer. Right?
Okay.
Carlisle.
It's West Bromwich Albion at 552 feet above sea level.
I even want to play this game as a stupid game. You're not allowed to embarrass me on my own thing.
Okay. And a team that your beloved Stoke could soon be playing against, Forest Green Rovers, moved from their home ground in 2006. It was an emotional farewell to the Lawn Ground. What is their new stadium called? It sounds like a hard question, but it's really not.
The Lawn Ground.
It's the New Lawn, but I'm going to give you half because I'm nice. Just make sure you reciprocate such generosity when you come to ask yours. So that's half there, but I mean the first answer in itself almost warrants a 0. But
this is a stupid game. I don't even like it. The lowest attendance was 3,039 in 1993 when Everton played away to which club? That's Premier League attendance. I just wanted to.
3,000.
That wasn't Premier League. But
What year, sir?
Do
we know?
1993.
Bradford.
Wimbledon. How many teams were there in the first ever Premier League?
20.
22.
I can't go 0 again.
Yes, you can. Against which team did Wayne Rooney score his first Premier League goal?
Arsenal.
It was Arsenal, but you don't get any points.
What was that?
Because you embarrassed me. You got 1, okay?
You see, victories all round. What a day, ladies and gentlemen. I think that's my first win of the season, isn't it?
No, you got the first one.
Oh, did I?
Yeah.
Oh, see, I was too many to count for this.
You're all in for a treat because That's Not News comes back again in a week's time. We're at Villa Park next time.
Doesn't stop, does it, mate?
Dan
Doesn't
is very excited. He's absolutely buzzing. We're going to meet Dan's dad. If he wants to be on camera.
I should mention that he does hold a position of some relevance to the club. We're not just going to be.
No, he's not just going to walk in. He's not just going to
No.
walk into That's Not News. Thank you very much for watching episode 4. We've had a great time at the Hawthorns.
Big thank you to West Brom. Just want to shout them out.
Massive thank you to West Brom for allowing us to be here in their very own TV studio. I feel like think of Sky Sports for come on, Jack, better than this.
I don't know any Championship ones because we're in the Premier League, the league above. And it was just down there actually where that was sealed. Just going to put that out to all the West Brom fans.
Go leave if you want.
I will do. I'm on a high.
Thank you very much for watching. Make sure you like, share and subscribe and visit us at DawsonFootball.com where there's plenty of content to come.